Now, firstly, I want to say, like I did yesterday, some of you will have been here yesterday and you will have heard this yesterday, but you're going to hear it again today. Thank you. From me to you, as teachers, you do the second most important job in the world, the first most important being parents. Second most important is teaching, and you don't get thanked nearly enough for doing that work. It's a hard job. I mean, it's very rewarding and it's a hard job. So thank you from me to you and from all of Australia to you. And been hearing lots of things about how the Korean education system works. It is very similar to Australia. You have very similar problems. Not just Australia, the US, the UK, many parts of Europe. Finland has very similar problems, although you don't hear about it so much, but they do. And so today I'm going to talk about the role of the principal in establishing a secure base in the school, because there need to be multiple secure bases in schools. Teachers need to be secure bases for the students, but they can't be that if somebody's not looking after them. And that's generally, well, in a big school it might be the next level up of leadership and then eventually the principal. But the principal also needs to be supported by the system, either, regions or however it works. And if there is a failure along that continuum somewhere, everybody suffers. So it's really important that providing a secure base is happening in every school. And the only way that can be done at any level is for you also to have a secure base. So if we're talking about principals and how they can help staff feel like they are valued and supported, so that they can then do supporting the next down the line. I mean, in the book I talked about it sort of like the flow of water. It just flows down and it will flow nicely. But, insecurity can flow like water as well. And in fact, anxiety, we know, is contagious. When somebody is anxious, unless someone can calm that down, it will get bigger. And I think globally we have just gone through this huge thing that's made everybody anxious. I mean, lots of people didn't know if they were going to live or die if they walked past their neighbour's house initially. That kind of trauma is now floating around the system, and we need to deal with that as educators. And that's not what you've been trained to do. But the reality is that's what's part of your job now. So, let's talk about it. In terms of the principal, it's about setting the emotional tone of the school. Now, what sort of tone do you think you want in a school? And by the way, I've just been hearing that you work very, very long hours. Now, I'm going to say the hours. You put your hand up if you agree. Elementary school is 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Yes? Secondary school is 8 a.m. to 11 p.m. No? Good. Because I was so worried when I heard that. Is it 8 to 5 as well? And then people do things after school, tutoring and... Okay. But often 6 days in a week? 6 days? 5? Oh, good, I can relax a bit. I was thinking, how do I provide security for this group who is just exhausted? But you're not working quite as hard as I thought. Well, that's good. So, the thing about having a secure base is knowing the facts, which is why I checked in, so that you can predict the things that are going to cause anxiety and get in early and try and calm things down. One of the things about being a principal is that you've seen a lot of these things before, that the teachers haven't seen. It's brand new for them and they are going to get anxious. And that's very normal and that's okay, but it needs to be dealt with early. And the quicker you can deal with the anxiety, the quicker everything can calm down and it'll be better for the students. But it also helps you deal with the dynamics of difficult staff relations, which you might have, difficult parent relations, and difficult student relationships as well. So the more people can feel secure, the less volatility there will be. There will still be those interactions and they will still be difficult, but they won't be as bad as they could be without that security underlying things. And it helps everybody enjoy their work better, which is also good for everybody. And as we talked about yesterday, it also leads to increased curiosity. So you get teachers who are more curious about how children learn and want to keep improving their practice, and you get kids who are more curious about how the world works and they want to engage with it, and that's going to lead to better student outcomes. So, how do you do this, setting the tone? It's about the principal must be the secure base in the school, firstly. Now, the principal needs a secure base for themselves, and we talked about that a bit yesterday, but if they don't provide that in the school at number one level, it's not going to happen. Teachers need to feel like they will be supported whether they do the right thing or the wrong thing. Because you have to assume that if a teacher does the wrong thing, and particularly young teachers very early in their career will sometimes do the wrong thing through the best of intentions, but it will be, something a bit silly. And if they feel like the principal will help them work through those issues so that they can learn and they won't make the same mistake twice, things will be a lot better. So that means the principal needs to be available. It means being around, hearing what's going on and being able to move in quickly when you need to. That's not an easy task, that's very difficult. And managing the logistics of that is difficult, and it changes from school to school, it changes from day to day, it changes from year to year. But a good principal will work out how to be available and where to be when things are going a bit awry. When I was a very young teacher, our principal used to wander around the school almost, as far as we could tell, all day, every day. And we all thought, I wonder what she actually does. But she was keeping a kind of ear out of where the noise was right, where the noise was not so good in the classrooms, and just being around and just trying to see what teachers were doing and then have a conversation with them in break times. And so you always knew that if you didn't see her for a while, you must be going okay. We all learnt that in our teaching. But the other thing that a secure-based teacher or principal does is remains calm when there's the anxiety. And that can be very difficult. Because sometimes teachers do things that you think, this is going to cause me a lot of problems for the next whatever amount of time. But you still have to remain calm dealing with the teacher. Excuse me. And you help them overcome the problem. And it takes a bit of, I suppose, the thing yesterday, which is helping define what the problem was. How did you attack it? Have you seen this kind of thing before? What have you done in the past that worked? Did it work this time? No. Why not? What will we do next time? Working through solutions to problems. And you need to do that by gently challenging what the teacher's model of how the world works. Now, partly that might be they just don't have the skills yet because they're a new teacher, but partly it might be that they've, as we talked about yesterday, they've moved into teaching because they're insecurely attached and they have this vague feeling that being a teacher might make them better. And for lots of teachers, it will make them better if they've got good support from you as the principal, particularly. And that's much more challenging, and you need to do that more carefully. So it means becoming a mentor to them. Now, mentoring, I don't know in career if mentoring has the same kind of difficult language attached to it that it does in English. But mentoring in the English language and across Europe and America can mean so many different things. It's very hard to know what a mentor is. Sometimes it's a coach, sometimes it's a supporter, sometimes it's an advocate. And in this model, which is outlined in the book that we're talking about, is about being the person who is really being the secure base for the person to explore who they are as a professional teacher in a way that makes them grow. And you do that by, as I said, I think on the previous slide, empathically failing the child. Except in this case, it's empathically failing the teacher. So it's knowing what they need to grow and letting them stretch a little bit each time. And the way you do that as the principal is, firstly, to ask good questions if you're going to ask questions. I'm going to get to the point where we're saying it's even better if you don't ask any questions, but we'll just park that for a minute. But for the questions or your discussions that you have with these teachers about how to grow, you're trying to move from the collective to the personal. And you will notice in the language of a teacher who's very distraught about something, there'll be big global statements often, which are a pointer to their anxiety, rather than the specifics of what's going on. And what your job is to try and actually help them go from this global, I can't cope, it's all too huge, down to a very specific problem. Okay, this happened, what happened beforehand? Did you notice da 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 da? And they then shrink the problem to the size where you can bite off bits of the problem in little chunks and deal with it. Whereas the global thing is overwhelming. So you're going from the general, collective, to the very personal, very specific. You go, general to specific. And often you'll hear in the language also, it's very abstract. These kids are just, out of control. Well, what does that mean? Absolutely nothing. It means I don't know how to deal with these children. But, which children, when, what, why, that's the kind of stuff you need to get at. Now, what a principal who's, or any kind of leader, supporter, who's feeling a bit anxious themselves is often able to do at this time, unwittingly, is get a bit anxious themselves, and usually they'll go into rapid problem solving because I've been here before, I know what to do, you should have done this, you should have done that. And they'll ask these closed questions, Was it child X? Yes. Did they throw that ball? Yes. Okay, well what you should have done was, boom, boom, boom. And that's actually them dealing with their anxiety, not helping the teacher. So, closed questions are not, and a closed question in English, I'm sorry if cultural stuff. A closed question means the answer is either yes or no. What you want is questions that are open, that opens up the teacher to explore what was going on for them and explore the situation at the same time. Okay. And closed questions also kind of cement your power. And the idea of this kind of mentoring is not to be powerful over the person, but to be powerful under the person so that they can grow. So, bad questions do all of these sorts of things. They become intrusive. The person's already feeling anxious. Something's gone wrong, and you're going to make it worse by trying to help. You don't want to do that. But you do it unwittingly, potentially because you're anxious yourself. So you start interrogating them instead of exploring the issues. You create this sense of inequality. The teacher who's already feeling bad about themselves, probably because of what went on, now feels worse because not only did I just do something silly in the classroom or didn't control a situation well or whatever, but now the principal knows it and they're making me feel worse about it. So we have this concept in English called the imposter syndrome. So, I knew I was no good as a teacher and now the evidence is clear and now the principal knows as well. So you don't want that. You want the exact opposite of that. And the other thing is that you can get curious. The situation might be funny. You can think, oh, this will be a good story I can tell my other principal friends. Tell me more about this, tell me more about that. And it's really your curiosity about the situation instead of helping the teacher. And it's very easy to slip into these situations and you don't want to do that. You want to really be responding rather than reacting to what's going on. So often asking why did you do that is the worst question you can ask. You need to almost just say, take why out of your vocabulary as a school leader when it comes to these sorts of situations. All the other questions like who, what, when, they're good, where, but why is usually no good. And if you're teachers of adolescents, you'll also know that often that's the worst question you can ask an adolescent. An adolescent who's just done something silly, thrown a ball, why did you do that? What's the answer? I don't know. Same sort of thing. So it's better to just lose why questions. So, how do you give the power to the person, particularly if it's an anxious situation? So what would you like to tell me about what just happened? Which gives them the power to withhold information, because right at that moment, withholding might be the safest thing for them. You want them to open up and tell you the whole story, but right at that moment, that might be the very time that they just don't feel able to do that. So you have to give them that space and give them the dignity of hanging on to it, and then hopefully telling you later, when things have calmed down and the situation's been resolved, how to go a bit further, dig a bit deeper and explore a bit more the issues that are going. So you can then start thinking about their feelings. Don't stick in the cognitive area of what just happened, because they know all that stuff. You don't need to go over that. That's just your curiosity. But what was going on inside them when they did that? What was it about what the child said to them that made them react that way? Or what was it that was being said between children in the playground? Or what was it said in the staff meeting that made another teacher so upset? Or whatever it was. And then get them to explore things like, how did they react in this situation? Have you ever been in a situation like that before? How did you react then? Is this different? Why is this different? Well, except don't say why. So you try, again, getting them to think specifically, and what you're trying to do as a dyad, as the two of you, is to get the problem out of the teachers kind of feeling overwhelmed and out there as a problem in the world that the two of you are solving together. And you can then get them to reflect on that. You know, what do you think that was all about? These are good kind of interesting ways to kickstart a conversation. But not asking questions is even better. So it's not your job to be like the lawyers who are arguing in court about what actually happened and when and why and who's guilty and all of that stuff. That's actually not your job. It's not their job. Your job is to make the teacher a better teacher. The teacher's job is to make the students better students. And you need to really focus on that. So, these are some stems that you can use to elicit conversation without setting the agenda. Remember that you're trying to keep the dignity with the other person as much as possible. So you have some invitations for them to talk and let you know what they might be ready to talk about. But you give them the dignity of remaining private about the things that they're not ready to talk about yet. But you can, if you start to get a bit psychological about this, be good at noticing how they're reacting when they're telling you some of these things. People will colour up in the face, or they might start sweating, or they might shake, or they might laugh, or all sorts of things, and you can notice those things and feed that back to them. You know, I noticed you smiled when you said da 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 da. And just leave it at that. So you're just giving them a bit of feedback, being a bit of a mirror for them, so that they're exploring the ideas. Because in the end, you need the teacher to solve the problem for themselves, and it's probably true that they've got the answers inside, they just haven't got to it yet. And you're there not as the smart interrogator who will lead them like a lawyer to admit something that they didn't want to admit. You're being the exact opposite, helping them realise that they knew all along and just had forgotten at that moment, or they'd learnt something out of experience. And then if you're genuinely confused about how they're speaking to you, you can say things like, well, I'm a bit confused. And then it's a good idea to replay some of the conversation you just had. I'm confused because you said this and you said this and you said this. Again, you're not a lawyer, you're just genuinely confused. So, and then, that sounded really interesting, or that sounded really annoying, or that sounded really scary, or whatever it was. Stressful, wonderful, difficult. I guess the other thing to say about that is use their language back to them. If they said something was stressful and you were feeding back in the conversation to them, use the word stressful, don't say anxious. Because anxious might not mean the same for them as it does for you. So if you use the word they used, you're more likely to feed back to them something that they can understand and help them go further with the question. Now that's a really rapid run through a 3-day workshop that I usually run, where you get to practice all of these things as groups. But it's, I can make more of the detail of this available to you online or whatever. We can work out how to do that afterwards. But I guess the takeaway message is your power is to be underneath the teacher, not over the top of the teacher, to help them deal with whatever it is and to lift them up so that they can face the next situation. Because when they go into the next situation where the potential for the same problem exists, you want them to feel more confident than the last time they felt it, they faced it. And if they fall down, you help pick them up again. Exactly the same as teaching and learning. So, I will now finish. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much for having me this afternoon, and it's a privilege to be here. I've learned so much in this wonderful country in a few days. I'm going to talk about the children. I'm going to talk about the children in your classroom. I am a principal of Serpent Primary School in Australia, in Melbourne. It's a very, very high achieving school. We have a lot of Korean students, actually. That's a big help. But not everybody is achieving well. The key to understanding what's happening behind children's behaviour helps us to develop strategies to improve that behaviour. So we've been working with Phil as a school for many years now. First of all, as myself as a principal in the mentoring program, but with our leadership team and with our teachers and at staff conferences, and we've been developing a trust relationship with Dr. Riley over many years, and it's really influencing the way that we manage our students. So today I'm going to talk about how we have applied these strategies in the management of 3 children who are experiencing attachment disorder. You'll recognise them straight away. These kids in your room. Hopefully not this year, maybe not next year either, but sometime this kid's coming to your room. This little boy, this is a real person, and he's not out at our school now, but he's pretty typical of this type of child. He has 2 parents, but they're not together. Neither of them want to parent him, and so he's been passed from one place to another. His background is entirely unstable. He hasn't received much positive affirmation in his life. Most of it is negative. So when he arrives at school, he's hostile. He's got a language bank that nobody wants to hear. He has no ability to form a relationship, and his behaviour is alienating. Hand up if you've seen this kid. No one. You must have perfect children in Korea. Okay. Well, this kid comes into his first classroom and he's erratic and unpredictable. You notice I say he, because it's nearly always a he. He doesn't respond to positive emotion or physical closeness. He has a need for control. He won't be controlled by the teacher. Sit down? No, he'll stand up. Get your work ready? No, he won't do that. He'll run around and collect all the pencils in the pencil tin. He'll switch the computers off and on. He's a nightmare. He may be in constant flight and fight. Now, I'm sure that you have very secure schools. I haven't been to any, I have to apologise to say, but I'm sure you have fences and gates. But in Australia, we don't have gates. So when he runs away, in our context, he runs away down the street. Not too far though, just keeps his eye to see if we're watching and we're going to come after him. He hasn't developed trust relationships at all. And the teacher already in the first week has had enough. The social response to this student in your school is that there is real pressure to conform to the classroom norms and rules. Do what the teacher says. But he won't. He gets really negative feedback from students and parents. When parents in the playground, they bring their kid in and they see this kid pushing everyone off the slide, swearing, this is what they say to their kid: don't go near that kid, stay away from that kid. And they come and see the principal and they say, I don't want my kid in the same classroom as that kid. So already more negative feedback. He's not forming relationships. He experiences punishment and rejection for his behaviour. He's excluded from social situations. No birthday parties for this kid. No one wants him in their house. He's excluded from play, and his behaviour gets worse. If he sees other children playing and he's excluded, he picks up sticks, he picks up stones, he pushes children over, he pushes them off the slide. There are a lot of complaints for the principal coming from this kid. So I know that we do what you do. We have a lot of assessments in place. We better find out there's something wrong with this kid. So we do a psychological assessment, we do a speech assessment, we do a CARS autistic assessment, we do hearing and eyesight. Oh, it's all normal. There might be a diagnosis of ADHD or ODHD or autism spectrum disorder. Sometimes there's medication. Okay, this kid has to be calmed down, subdued behaviour. I apologise for this term, but I call it the zombie in the corner syndrome. So we've controlled the behaviour with medication. He's sitting down, hostile but passive in a corner. Do we know if he's learning anything? No. Now, the teacher with this kid, please don't think I don't understand this problem. On 2 days before I came to this conference, we had a kid totally lose control. And you know the sanitizer bottles that we have, the plastic sanitizer bottles, a bit like the drink bottles that you've got. He found a container of those. He was in the conference room next to my office and he was throwing them at the wall. And the wall of my office was shaking and pictures were falling off because of this kid losing it in the background. But the teacher of this child needs an enormous amount of support. They must always be an experienced teacher that has this child. Maybe it's you, and maybe you have this kind of kid every single year, and it's exhausting. There must be an agreed, consistent, calm approach by all staff. You can't have one person shouting at the child and another person speaking calmly and persuasively with them. The teacher needs an experienced mentor, as outlined by Dr. Riley, to give debriefing and advice when something happens. They need time to work one-on-one with the child. Don't take the child out with somebody else and leave the teacher with the class. Give the class to somebody else and let the teacher take the child out and help to develop a relationship with that kid. There needs to be another backup person for the child. It can't just be the classroom teacher. So if you're the assistant principal, you're an ideal person to make a special space for that child. And reassurance for skills after the child rejects them. Because if you're a teacher and this child is rejecting of you, does something terrible to you, steals something precious of yours, says something very unkind to you, that's a personal slight for yourself. And you think, oh, I must be a bad teacher, why is this happening? But actually, it's a very positive response that you are having an effect on this child, and they are making some way forward. You will feel exhausted when you've had this child in your class. I had a teacher last week come and see me in the morning after the bottle throwing event, and she said, Wilma, I went home and I cried all night. And I understand that. She put so much into that child. And to have a day like that, we punched her, by the way, before he got to the bottle event. Okay, so this particular child that we're talking about, this individual child, got all the way to year 6. He's the zombie in the corner. He's hostile, he won't write, he won't read, we don't know what he knows. He doesn't really want to come to school, he doesn't want to be at home either because we're not sure where home is. But he had a wonderful teacher who understood his background and what motivated him. And that teacher understood that this was the last chance this kid was getting in year 6 before he goes to high school. Someone has to help him make relationships that might never ever come to be this chance again. Giving power and control, how can we do that? Well, this is an Australian budgerigar. Now, we have millions of these in the bush, but people also sometimes keep them as pets. And you can train them, you can let them out of the cage and they'll sit on your shoulder, and you can actually teach them to talk as well, and they will say phrases that you teach them. So the teacher got one of these pets for the class, and he put this child in charge of the pet. So he was responsible for giving it food and water and care, and also with teaching it in coming out of the cage to sit on his shoulder if he was doing his work. So there was a reward system in place here. The teacher told the child that when the bird is anxious, it has cold legs. And when the bird is comfortable, its legs are warm and its feathers are fluffy. So the child made an attachment not to a person, but initially to the bird. And also, a bird isn't going to give any criticism. It's always going to be there. It gives an unconditional love. So the teacher also was very good in explaining context, social context, over and over and over. And at the end of the year, the kid got to take the bird home. I do have to say to you though, he said to me on graduation day, I'm not coming to graduation. I said, oh, that would be a shame. Why not? Oh, I'm not coming. I won't be coming. I said, well, it's a shame because I've got all the certificates in order. And if you're not there, all the people will get the wrong certificate. Oh, all right. So he came. 6 years went by. I tell this story today because 6 years went by and he came back this year. He came in the front door of the school. He was enormous, absolutely enormous, and probably the sort of character, if you saw him down the street in Seoul, you'd probably dart into a shop, I think. He looks a bit suspicious. But he came in and he was really happy, and he came in to tell us, you know, when I was at this school, I was really, really happy. It was a really long journey. We didn't get all the way with him, but he did learn some things. And some of the strategies, I'm not suggesting you all get a budgerigar, But good teachers can think of strategies that are different, that will help the child and understand that you're someone special and I'm thinking just about you. Child number 2 with attachment disorder, I actually personally think is the most worrying of all. This child is currently in my school. He is withdrawn. He doesn't express emotion. I've never seen him smile. He doesn't make eye contact. He watches what's going on, but he doesn't engage. You see him just standing there. He fails to ask for help. He appears sad, and he hasn't developed any relationships at school in the 4 years he's been there. He has only one parent. He has a single parent, his mother, but she works very, very long hours. And the way that he came to our attention was that we noticed he was failing at school in his assessment, and he appears unkempt, and he would not have any food in his bag, but he would always have a lot of money. He's too little to understand what to do with that money, how to go and buy something at the canteen. The social response to that little boy, he's totally invisible in a classroom. Everyone else, as Phil reminded us yesterday, is seeking support, and he's standing back. He doesn't connect with the other children and teachers. He's not seeking support. He's not crying. He's not temper tantruming. He's not throwing a chair. He's withdrawn, and he doesn't respond to positive support. It's possible he is in extreme mental health danger. The assistant principal was responsible for all children who were failing in the school and had a very, very close look at this child and decided that he was actually not being supported with the basic needs such as food and clothes. And so she decided to give him breakfast every day. She gave him his own special little big dish and spoon and his cereal. And every single day he arrives, comes in the front door of the school, dives into the assistant principal's office, gets his little bowl and his spoon, and has his cereal. It's a positive place for him to go. It's a safe place for him to go. I often see him there at the end of the day as well. If his mother's late picking him up, he'll often go and just sit in the assistant principal's office. And he's got someone that he's developing trust in. Every single day I see him. Now sometimes he talks a little bit, and he's beginning to play, I notice, with the other children outside. Not as a leader in the play, but a joiner in the group. I see him running in a clump for a tag game or playing together in a group of children who are playing with cards on the ground. He's making progress. This student, student 3, is the most worrying student that I've experienced in a more than 40 years career. This happened a long time ago. He was very, very quiet, very well behaved. He was anxious and asked for a clarification, as Phil explained yesterday, wanting reassurance all the time. You know that kid, when you come back to the classroom, he's at the door? That was this kid. This name was Frederick. He didn't make relationships easily, and he seemed isolated. I did never see him smile. He didn't express any emotion at all, and he was extremely high achieving. The story in his background was that his mother had come to Australia with his father, given birth to him, and gone back overseas and never returned. So his sense of abandonment was very, very real. His dad is a lovely person, but at the time he was particularly young, putting a family together, earning a living. He probably didn't have much support either. I couldn't be critical of the dad at all, but the family did have a lot of special needs. He was in year 3, he was 8 years old. He was doing maths problems. And one day, in the middle of his maths lesson, he got up from his desk in a room that looked just like this, and he ran as hard as he could at that front white board and smashed his face and his head into that and lay on the ground. A teacher came and got me, and she said, I don't know what to do. There was nothing happening in the classroom. He was just doing his maths problem. And I picked him up and cradled him in my arms, and he said, I just try so hard to be perfect. I just try so hard to be perfect. Now, that little boy did continue at our school until year 6. We did, of course, have a lot of help for him. But all of these years I worried, and when I was coming to see you today, I thought, I wonder where Frederick is. What has happened to this little boy who had a very severe attachment disorder? And I found out he's still trying to be perfect. He's a massive award winner in his industry, and he also provides for a lot of philanthropic support for disadvantaged people in the community. He really is a pillar of our community. But these are the children, those 3 children that I've talked about today, they are the children that need you most. Their only chance is a teacher. They're not going to get it any other way. What, they're going to wait till they're an adult? Somebody's going to be kind to them? I don't think so. And it's why we became teachers, because we're passionate about making a difference. And it's really important that you keep on doing it. This is the work that really, really shapes our society and makes us more human. Now, while I've been here in Korea, I've heard a lot of stories about your teachers and the stress that your teachers are under. And so, you know, because I'm from Melbourne, I like to read the Melbourne News, see what's happening. I'm just scrolling here looking for the Melbourne News. Here it is here. So the Melbourne News today with the ABC, the headline is Victorian teachers, Victorian, not Seoul teachers in Korea, Victorian teachers struggling with student behaviour. This morning, Hannah Blackmore has been teaching food technology in public schools for a decade. She says lately she goes home every day and cries. I go home and I question myself as a teacher. I question whether I was capable of staying in this job. This year I've thought about changing careers, which makes me emotional because I love my job. She was inspired by her mother, who was teaching food technology for 40 years, but she said the joy of teaching has turned into a daily challenge in the last couple of years. She's taught in schools across all of Melbourne, but since COVID, here's a surprise for all of us, she's found that students are struggling to follow instructions and were argumentative. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? Can I only encourage you, you've gone into teaching because it's a passion to make a difference to everyone. You are making a difference with people's lives. We have had a massive disruption in relation to the pandemic, but we will get past it and we'll all get past this together. But it's a global thing. I wish you well and I thank you for your service. Thank you.
안녕하세요. 저는 두 번째 세션 안전지대의 대담 사회를 맡은 서울 3.1초등학교 교장 송영미입니다. 공동 진행을 맡으신 세곡중학교 정진선 교장 선생님이십니다. 필립 교수님, 그다음에 윌마 콜튼 교장 선생님, 안녕하세요. 감사합니다. 저도 일어나니까. 제가 좀 떨렸는데요. 두 분의 강의가 주로 안전지대이기 때문에 좀 덜 떨리게 되는 계기가 된 것 같습니다. 두 분의 주제 강연 인상 깊게 들었습니다. 며칠 전에 입국, 호주와 다른 계절 기온, 서울의 활기참과 어제 포럼의 그 첫날의 토론 열기로 그 다음에 무거웠거든요. 다소 열기는 있었지만 그 여독이 잘 풀리셨는지 모르겠습니다. 어제 상처와 치유라는 주제 아래 조금 기관장으로서 어저께 청중으로 이제 저희가 참여하게 됐는데 조금 그 해결책이 보이질 않아서 다소 좀 무거운 마음으로 이제 집을 가게 되었는데 오늘은 좀 다르겠죠? 네, 기대하겠습니다. 두 번째 세션에서는 돌보는 이와 돌봄을 원하는 이들과의 관계 형성에 대해서 좀 더 구체적이고 실제적인 내용을 다루어 주셨습니다. 그래서인지 라일리 교수님의 저서 이 관계의 교실 이렇게 뭐가 많이 붙어 있죠? 네. 저기 초등, 중등 선생님께서 약 한 달 동안 이렇게 독서 토론을 하고 줌을 통해서 이야기를 나누었습니다. 그것을 통해서 정리된 질문을 주로 하겠습니다. 여러분께서는 주제 강연이나 저서를 읽다가 궁금한 점 있으시면 우리 QR코드로 의견을 남겨주시기 바라겠습니다. 그러면 두 번째 세션의 여는 질문으로 우리 교수님께 질문을 드리겠습니다. 어제 세션 마지막 말미에서 이 카인드 프로그램에 대해서 잠시 나왔는데 교수님께서 굉장히 질문을 아껴두셨습니다. 오늘 꼭 오시라는 의미에서요. 그런 의미에서 저도 학교장으로서 단위 학교에서 교원 연수를 이제 운영하거나 매일 아침 어제 주시는 이제 두 분의 선생님을 이제 고민에 빠진 선생님을 만나 뵀는데 선생님들께서 이 카인드 기법을 학교에 좀 적용해 보거나 연수 방안에 적용해 보고 싶으실 텐데 실은 교사 선생님들의 개개인의 정보를 잘 얘기하지 않고 속내를 잘 드러내지 않는 현실에서 이런 프로그램을 어떻게 하면은 이제 적용할 수 있을까 지혜를 구하는데 교수님께서 오랜 경험을 통해서 도입하려는 학교에 이 1시간씩 6회기를 운영하는 그 시간의 적절함이라든가 라퍼 형성 과정에서 유의점, 그 만남 과정에서 어려운 점, 점점 죄송합니다. 자꾸 구체적으로 질문합니다. 어떻게 극복하셨는지 말씀을 해주시면 도입하고자 하는 교장 선생님들이라든가 어떤 교감 선생님들께 도움이 되시리라 생각이 듭니다. 감사합니다.
Hello. That's a very big question, but a very good one. We had the same problem implementing kind in Victoria firstly, but then in other states, in Queensland, in the Northern Territory, in the Catholic system, because it's very different to what teachers normally expect to do, and it's based on psychological processes rather than educative processes, and I mean there's a lot of overlap between psychology and education. But KIND itself is based on a couple of really important psychological processes, and one is called iatrogenic anxiety. And iatrogenic anxiety is the anxiety that's produced by the process of what's going on. So my best example of this for teachers is that you are maybe talking to a student, or if you're a principal, you're talking to a staff member, and they know, the other person knows they have to tell you something really bad. And they know they have to tell it to you in this meeting. And you might be meeting for 5 minutes, or you might be meeting for an hour, but you know they're talking around and around something, and then you suddenly say, look, I've got another meeting, I've got to go in a minute, and they just blurt it out. I hit the child, or whatever it is. That's iatrogenic anxiety at work, because they've been building and building, and the process is, oh, no, I have to tell them, and I have to tell them, but I really don't want to tell them, it's going to be bad for me. So the whole KIND program is based on iatrogenic anxiety. So it's 6 sessions. Each session only goes for 1 hour. And at the end of it, it's done. You're finished. So if people know that they're going to need something out of this, they know they've only got 6 hours to get it done. And in the, I guess, the busyness of what I see as Korean ways of being, that probably might work quite well to say, time limited, you know, let's get to it. Let's not waste any time here. And the KIND program is based on the sort of mentoring thing that I was just speaking about before. It's the secure-based object talking to, or not talking, even better, to the person about what's going on inside them. But instead of talking about an incident, we're talking about who they are as a teacher, how they deal with particular kinds of issues. That might be problem children, that might be managing workload, it might be whatever the issues for the teacher. But the teacher runs the content. The only kind of framing, apart from this iatrogenic 6 1-hour sessions, is that it's 2 sessions of the here and now. Let's really explore what's going on for you now in the classroom. 2 sessions, then it's 2 sessions of how did you get here, and that's, why did you become a teacher, what was motivating you, how does that fit in with what you know about where you are. And then once you got through those 2 sessions, you know where you are in time and space and real time, you know how you got here, which means you can then look forward. What do I want to do now? Let's set some goals for me for the next however long, 5 years, 3 years, 6 months, whatever it is. Again, they set that agenda, not you. So it's a bit difficult to explain in a short time, but in a sense it's sort of simple. It's all in the execution. It's how you do it. That's the important part. And again, it's the sorts of mentoring type questions that I was explaining before. I hope that helps.
감사합니다. 말씀 들어보니까 이게 1한 회기당 6시간씩 하는 것은 전반적인 그 멘토링 프로그램 운영하는 그런 타입 어떤 프로그램이고, 그 다음에 개별적으로 선생님을 만날 때는 한 번 만날 때 어떤 제한된 시간 안에 불안감을 최소화로 나타내는 그런 기법을 쓰는 것 같다라고 요약이 됐습니다. 다음은 우리 컬팅 교장 선생님께 여쭙겠습니다. 그러면 이제 우리 교수님하고 오랜 기간 이런 프로그램을 적용하셨는데, 실제로 우리 지금 교장 선생님이 계신 멜버른 초등학교에서 간단하게 어떻게 적용하셨는지 이야기를 한번 들어보겠습니다. 여쭤도 될까요? 예.
Yes, so one of the things that I think is the most important thing is the trust relationship between the school leader and the teacher or the leader that you're mentoring. I think this is the key thing, and so it doesn't just develop in the KIND frame. You've already developed that relationship over time, which is hopefully a sincere relationship, so that you know what the boundaries are in terms of the KIND conversations as well. So it's not about your personal life or those things. It's about your career journey, your hopes and aspirations, what's going to come next, and having support for that thing, and having that professional relationship of mentor and mentee. Although there are the 6 sessions in the school situation, it can actually go on for a long time. And even when people get promotion and go on to other places, they will often come back for more of that that type of advice based on that relationship. But I think the principal has to be an approachable and a trusted colleague first.
감사합니다. 의미 있는 말씀이셨을 것 같습니다. 접근할 수 있는 관계인데, 어제 세션 1에서 도와주려고 갔는데 가르치려고 이렇게 거부감을 느끼는 선생님께 더 활짝 마음을 열고 기다림과 접근할 수 있는 방법을 찾아봐야겠습니다. 3번째 질문은 우리 정 교장 선생님께서 질문하겠습니다.
네, 아까 서두에 말씀드렸듯이 저희가 그 관계의 교실이라는 책을 가지고 지난 한 달 좀 넘는 시간 동안 계속해서 독서 모임을 진행했습니다. 그래서 거기에서 선생님들께서 질문을 원하셨던 내용 중에 그 교수님께서 쓰신 그 책의 중간 부분에 그 본류와 지류 그리고 삼각주라는 표현이 나옵니다. 안전지대에 관해서요. 그런데 선생님들이 이런 질문을 하셨어요. 꼭 안전지대의 출발이죠. 그러니까 본류를 학교장으로 봐야 되겠느냐. 혹시 안전지대가 교감이 될 수도 있고 또 동료 교사가 될 수도 있지 않겠는가. 이런 것을 의문을 던지셨고, 그리고 교수님께서는 안전지대가 이제 본류에서부터 지류까지 이렇게 흘러간다고 말씀을 하셨는데, 그런 흐름이라기보다는 네트워크처럼 작은 안전지대들이 다 모여서 학교 전체의 안전지대가 되는 건 아닐까? 이런 말씀을 독서 모임에서 하셨습니다. 혹시 새로운 아이디어라면 필립 교수님 어떻게 생각하시는지 이 자리에서 설명을 좀 듣고 싶습니다.
Very good point. Yes, you can have lots of secure bases in a school, and the best schools do have lots. Generally speaking, if there are lots in a school, the principal is always one of them. It's very, very rare, it does happen, where the insecure principal allows security everywhere else in the system. But once the principal, and particularly in a big school, a principal who really trusts their teachers can really devolve responsibility down the line, and people can take over aspects of running the school. Because a school is a big complex organisation. You can have lots of security that information doesn't, every bit of information in the school does not have to flow into the principal's in-basket. Some things can be dealt with much lower down, and if the principal and that person has a good relationship, they'll know that they can trust that person to do lots of that work, and the principal doesn't even have to know about it. But if something there is needs to come to the principal, or that person makes a mistake and I should have told you about this but I didn't because I thought it was all okay, that person still has to know that the principal supports them. And so the security is not threatened by mistakes. Everybody's going to make mistakes, but the security of the school should not be threatened by those mistakes. Mistakes are opportunities to learn, and if you treat it like that, you can get by, and people will forgive you for all kinds of terrible mistakes if there is a high level of trust going on. So yes, in a good school, lots of secure bases, including between students. Kids form very powerful friendships, and a secure student can be a secure base for an insecure student. It would be really interesting to think about the child that has just started playing. Who's he playing with? That would be a really important thing for the teachers now to be thinking about. Why that person and why now? Because there's something really powerful going on. Not just with the poor boy who's had such a terrible background, but with the other kids who have seen an opportunity to move in and help him grow, because they're going to help the teachers with him growing up as well. So, yeah, security everywhere.
Can I build on Dr. Riley's comment by saying that the secure base that's established by the principal is built over years and years and years of building relationships with the community and being visible in the community. So do the parents always seeing you? Do you know all of the parents' names? Do you know all of the children's names? It's hard, isn't it, to remember everybody every day? But then when a crisis comes, for example, the pandemic, people have confidence you're going to look after them. And they will, when people are really, really anxious and things all go wrong, if you've got all of that background of supporting them over such a long period and so many years, they will know that you will do the right thing and you will look after them. And the pandemic is probably a really good example of that for me as a secure base. I don't know whether I should tell you this story, but it's I'm a long way from home and you won't tell anybody, will you? When the pandemic came, we had a lot of our families were overseas for Chinese New Year in that January, February 2021, wasn't it? Pardon? Yes, 2020. And when our school year started in January, nobody came back to school. I think we had like we've got 1,000 students, 1,200 students, and only about 10 kids came. And I thought, oh, children might never come to school again, because the ones that were there, that were in Australia, were too afraid to send their children to school. And some of the others were caught overseas and couldn't get back to Australia. So we had this terrible problem. And the parents, I spoke to parents that had developed trust over many, many years, and they said to me, we're not sending our kids back because we know the family down the street there, they just came back from China, they were in Wuhan, and we are not sending our kids back to school because they have not stayed home for 14 days. Remember the whole thing about staying at home. And so I thought, okay, well, I know that I am a servant of the government, but what I discovered in that time from a personal point of view was I was much more attached to the people, to my teachers, to my children, and to my community. You'll be horrified when you hear this, but I thought I have to listen to what they've got to say and do what they tell me, because they were very well informed. So I put out a letter to the community and said, if you came back from overseas in the last 14 days, you must stay home for 14 days. And someone reported me to the Minister for Education. So I got a call from their office who said, how dare you put out a letter? You know, the government hasn't made this decision. And I said, look, I'm sorry, I don't want any of my children or my families to die, actually. And what is a matter of the heart is I am responsible for these people as a secure base. So all the kids came back the next Monday because they knew that I was going to enforce the 14-day rule. But do you want to know the funniest thing? I got a reprimand from the department, yes, but then the whole government in Australia made the same decision the next week. They were just a bit slow, and they rang and apologised. Yes, well, you were right in listening to your community, so I didn't get the sack or anything like that, wasn't dismissed. But I use that as an example of a secure base takes place over a long period of time, and then when something goes wrong, they know that you will be there for them. And it does earn amazing respect, I think. Sorry, that was a long story. Don't tell anybody I broke the rules for you.
감사합니다. 지금 말씀 들어보니까 코로나19가 계속해서 뉴스를 통해서 전 세계의 문제라고 알고 있었지만 막상 또 이렇게 우리 교수님과 교장 선생님의 말씀을 통해서 들으니까 정말 우리만의 문제가 아니었다라는 것을 느끼게 되었습니다. 그러면 이제 시간 때문에 마지막 질문을 한번 드리겠습니다. 지금 아까 교장 선생님의 강의 사례에서 보면은 산만한 친구 중에서 대표적으로 애착장애 이제 사례를 많이 보았는데 현재 저 대한민국도 애착장애 그 다음에 ADHD 같기도 하고 다른 장애로 많이 보이는데 그런 문제도 중요하지만 선생님들께서 요 어려움을 겪는 학부모님들과 이 사실을 안내하고 같이 협력을 얻어내는 과정에서 굉장히 많은 어려움을 호소하면서 각종 이제 법에 따라서 이제 좀 강력한 이제 소송을 걸리기도 하기 때문에 그것이 이번에 좀 크게 이슈화된 사례가 있습니다. 그래서 교장 선생님께서는 이 어려움을 겪는 학부모님들과의 협력을 이끌어내기 위해서 어떤 방법을 쓰셨는지 좀 간략하게 말씀을 듣고자 합니다.
And the parents aren't always interested. The parents aren't always present. And I hear from the other parents as well. Now I am told that you are driven crazy by parents contacting you in the night on WeChat. They also contact me in the night, but the wrong parents. They're wrong parents. So the parents of the other children contact me at 10 o'clock at night and say, you know, that kid knocked my kid over. I want that kid expelled, taken out of the school. That kid, and there is an enormous pressure. But the parents of the child are very often unapproachable. I guess we all do our best, don't we? But, you know, in the case of the little boy who was self-harming, his mother wasn't even in the country, he had no relationship with it at all. The father was doing as best as he could. it's very difficult. We have counsellors, you probably have counsellors as well, and those children have access to the counsellors. We have a school nurse. Some of those children spend a long time in the school health centre with the nurse. I think just pretending they've got a headache sometimes. When they can't cope with a situation in the classroom, they often say they've got a headache or a maths test. Yes, that's very popular. So using all of the school resources. Our assistant principals are wonderful. For the children who don't have good social relationships, they'll often organise a game in their office over the lunch break, with a few children to play, or the particular activities, a soccer game in the stadium to include those children. But I think that one-on-one support every day is really vital. But your question about the parents, we do try our best to involve the parents. Even if the children are on medication, sometimes they don't give the children the medication, or the medication's not administered correctly. It's a problem, I'm sure. I'm sure it's a problem for everyone, but we just do our best.
Can I add to that just a couple of brief things? One of the great challenges, I think, of teaching in the current climate is knowing where your job starts and finishes, particularly with parents. Because as Wilma's saying, some parents won't just be involved, and you really desperately would like them to be, but they're not going to. And then you can, as the teacher or the principal, you can suffer a vicarious trauma by trying to change something that is not ever going to change. So you have to be able to draw a line, and you can only do that with experience. You can't do that walking in as a first year out teacher, or even 2 or 3 or 4 years out probably. So you have to have experienced teachers helping you work out how to draw your own lines, and your lines have to be your lines, the line beyond which you will say, I've tried, that's it. And turn WeChat off. When they're ringing up and abusing you, hang up. Hang up when you're talking, rather than when they're talking, they'll just think the line dropped out. But find ways. You have to. Who's the most important person in this room? Hand up if you think you know who it is. Very bad answer. You all should have had your hands up, because you're all the most important person in this room for you. You have to look after yourself first, or you can't look after anybody else. And you're here to look after people. Coming over on the plane, they said, when the oxygen mask drops, you put it on yourself first and then help others. You must do that. Look after yourself first. That's not easy, it's just an order. Okay?
네, 감사합니다. 네, 같이 부탁드리겠습니다. 네, 지금 그럼에도 불구하고 지금 시간이 조금 지났지만 그래도 서운하면 안 되니까 현장 질문 하나를 좀 받아보도록 하겠습니다.
네, 지금 패들리스를 통해서 많은 선생님들께서 질문을 올려주셨는데요. 그거를 여기서 한꺼번에 다 하기에는 시간상 좀 부족하니까 그 세션 2의 가장 중요한 핵심 단어는 안전지대입니다. 그래서 그 안전지대에 관해서 올라온 질문을 하나 골라서 그래서 필립 라일리 교수님께 질문 드리도록 하겠습니다. 아까도 잠깐 본류에 대해서 말씀을 해주셨는데요. 결국 학교장이 그래도 많은 권한을 가지고 있기 때문에 학교장이 신뢰관계 구축을 시작해야 안전지대가 형성될 수 있다라는 말씀으로 저희 그 독서 모임에서 나온 질문에 대한 응답을 해주셨습니다. 근데 조금 예민한 질문일 수 있는데요. 교장은 공감을 통해 교사가 성장할 수 있도록 도와주어야 한다 라고 말씀하셨는데, 공감하지 않는 관리자에 의해서도 교사가 성장할 수 있는가? 라는 질문을 선생님들께서 던지셨습니다. 답변해 주시기 바랍니다.
Very good question. Everybody needs support, including the principal. So the principal needs to be able to get on the telephone sometimes to the person who's in charge of them and say, we have a problem, not I have a problem in my school, but we have a problem in the system. And that person needs to respond in the right way. Now, in Australia, I don't know about here, in Australia bureaucrats are often not very good at that. They go, no, you have a problem. There are a lot of principals who feel isolated and quite alone when difficult situations happen. And that means they cannot be as secure a base for everybody else downstream, because they know if they make a mistake, they're liable to get sacked. I mean, you know, Wilma took a big risk. She told it as a funny story, but that was a big risk, particularly because it was in writing. You know, sending that letter out. There would have been hundreds of principals in Australia who would never have sent that letter. But actually it was the most sensible thing to do at the time, given what we knew. So the system has to work as a whole, and that means all the way up to the Minister for Education. And in Australia, the Minister for Education is usually the last picked. It's not seen as the most important job. Here it might be different. I think you value education much more in Korea than we do in Australia. When that is a problem, the problem does seep through everywhere. So we all have to, you know, this is a collaborative exercise. We all have to work together and support each other. It's not an individual exercise. People can feel very isolated though.
I think my feeling is that when the principal isn't a secure base, and sometimes people have all kinds of personal issues that happens, there are other people in the school that do make it a secure base. So the assistant principal or the leader of the team, you will have people that you have trust relationships with and will provide that security. That would be my experience. It's ideal if it's the principal, but if it's not the principal, just following Phil's comments as well, there are other people in your school, there are colleagues in your school that are absolute rocks of stability. And I know in my school, some of my more junior teachers are like that, and I can rely on them for so many things myself for my own secure base. And people who always they know that I forget things, they remind me about things, they do thoughtful things to support me. So finding those secure people in your school is important, and I can tell from everybody in the audience, you would be those secure people as well in your school. Thank you.
네, 감사합니다. 두 번 말씀드리니까 지금 기관이나 국가나 한 개인이나 조직은 모두 유기체처럼 움직인다는 것을 다시 한번 새삼 느끼게 되었습니다. 교장도 안전기지가 필요하며 그럴 경우에 교장이 또 먼저 동료 교사와 학부모와 학생과 함께 안전기지로서 또 자리매김할 수 있다는 걸 다시 한번 느꼈는데, 최근에 우리 9월4일 이후로 이제 많은 선생님들께서 또 계속해서 움직이는 이 모습들이 국가로부터 선생님들이 자리매김할 수 있게 안전기지로서 학교가 설 수 있게 이렇게 계기가 되길 바라면서 사람에게 상처를 받았으나 그 상처를 치유할 수 있는 것 또한 사람, 건강한 관계입니다. 모두에게 안전기지가 되는 따뜻한 공교육의 현장, 학교를 꿈꾸며 이것으로 두 번째 세션을 마치겠습니다. 감사합니다. 두 분께 박수 부탁드리겠습니다.